All right, so let's just start out. In response to, I believe it was a French case in which someone was fired for refusing to remove her headdress, the typical Arabic/Muslim hijab. In response to that, EU courts have recently deliberated and decided that it is perfectly, what's the term, acceptable, let's say, for private businesses to decide to ban any such religious iconography or dress. Now, obviously, the right wing has seen this as a good thing because they're racist. That's half joking. They're all racist, but there's a good deal of them who are, and that's typical of what they would think. So there's two issues here as I see it. The fundamental principle, I think, is that it doesn't actually matter. There's no real impact of people wearing whatever they wear. Really, there's very little in terms of clothing or dress in any way that has any real impact on anything. You want to wear something on your head? Fine. What does that change? Does it make you any less able to do a sales job? I don't see why it would. Same with, I don't know, a skirt, trousers, whatever. I can't think of any type of clothing that would inherently be problematic. Maybe a cloak, but that's probably not going to be an issue. And if it were an issue, the specific job for which it is an issue would ban it. For safety reasons, or for whatever reasons. For practical, demonstrable reasons. And that's fine. But there is absolutely no negative impact from wearing a headdress. Nuns do it. Then again, that is a religious profession, if you'd call it that. That's not quite the same thing. But still, like, would people expect Sikhs to remove their turbans, or whatever those things are called? Because those are there for a reason. They have a lot of hair. If you take that off, the hair's just going to fall down. It's very long. That would be impractical. That would be counterproductive, in fact, if you were to force them to remove that. Same with the headdress. Unless, for whatever reason, they choose to wear the full... what's it called? I don't know what it's called. The one that covers their face. That I could see being problematic in certain jobs. It is perfectly acceptable for any business to ban things for a good reason. Now, if you're going to ban things because they're religious, as the EU court has decided is acceptable, then obviously, first thing, as they explicitly say, it's going to be for all religions. It's not just against Muslims, because that would be discrimination, and that is not allowed. And yeah, that's the minimum basic thing you'd expect from this kind of ruling, and that's fine. But there isn't much reason to ban religious dress in general either. It's not, like, at least it's fair, but there's still not much reason for it. I don't see any practical reason. The only reason that makes sense, and is probably why they did it, is for politics. Quite simply that they are trying to keep religion out of politics, which is good. Secularism is good. There's a reason for it. A very practical reason, which we'll go into in a different place, not here. That's fine, but at the same time, that's just going to radicalize the extremists. The extremists are going to say, as I can pull from this Guardian quote, as I can pull from this Guardian article. Let's see, who said this? I don't know who said this, but religious and political neutrality is a perfectly reasonable aim, and where businesses and organizations wish to present themselves in such a way, this ruling demonstrates that this approach is perfectly consistent with equality and human rights law. Yeah, that's perfectly. That makes a lot of sense. Where's the other quote? Can't find the other one. But the other one was that religious groups were complaining about it, saying that it shows a sort of lack of support for the religious communities. Which, I mean, like, that's not a huge deal, because what does support really mean? It's not like, again, there's no practical downside. This is not infringing upon religious, well, see, that's the issue, actually. The core issue of this, given all that I've said already, is that people should have the civil liberty to dress as they like, as long as it's not harmful to anyone else or impractical in some way that would justify them being forced not to do it. So there is a civil liberty argument for it, but there's also the freedom of businesses, private businesses, to be run as they like. That is a competing freedom. These two freedoms are contradicted to each other in this case. And it is, in fact, very much the freedom of the businesses to do this. They're not forced to ban anything, but if they deem it, if they deem that they want to do it, they have the right to, according to this ruling, which legally I think is fine. That makes sense. Because really, either way, there's probably not much practical impact. So it's really, like, there's no moral issue for people dressing however. But I think the one that matters more. So if we look at the two freedoms, the freedom to dress as you like, yeah, it's pretty hard to argue against, unless it's impractical in some way, unless there's good reason to not dress in some way, or to wear iconography of whatever. So, while freedom to dress as you like, or present yourself as you like, is good, it's not a it's not a practical issue. And a practical issue would be more important, because it's not even really a moral issue. It's moral because it's a freedom. Freedom's good. There's a moral aspect to that, but it's minimal. The specific freedoms in general have a moral aspect to them, which is it's morally good to be free to do things. But specifically, this freedom is not inherently all that moral. So one could argue the freedom to be able to kill someone, it's good to have that freedom. It's morally good to have any freedom, so it's morally good to have that freedom. But that freedom's moral, general goodness is outweighed by the moral badness of killing someone. to a much lesser extent, that applies to this analogously. Yes, I would say that freedom to dress as you like makes sense. It's a good thing until there's reason not to do it. Until there's practical reason. The thing is, depending on the job you have, it would make sense. Like, for example, working with machinery, you don't wear long or baggy clothes. There's some jobs where it's a safety issue. And obviously, a safety issue is going to take priority over the freedom to dress as you like. Because it has practical, moral impact. Physical, material, practical, whatever. And to rule that, see, the thing is, either companies are legally allowed to ban this, or they're legally not allowed to ban it. Because by default, you're not allowed to ban people. You're not allowed to tell people what they can do. At least for dressing. Like, by default, people dress as they like. You can't tell them to dress in a certain way. I guess uniforms, I don't know. But so it's I think it's a binary thing. I don't know if there's some kind of middle ground where the state just doesn't intervene. But if that's the case, then what happens when someone sues their company? Like I think happened in France. What happens when someone sues their company because they fired them for wearing whatever? That is a legal matter. But if there's no precedent to decide whether or not forcing employees to wear something is legally acceptable, then that's an issue, and it'll have to be resolved. There have to be some kind of decision made. I think it's a binary thing. Either private businesses are allowed to do it, or they are not allowed to do it. They're either banned from doing it, or they are permitted to do it. I think you can't ban them from doing it. I don't think that makes any sense. Or it's okay. So here's the distinction I have to make. I've been kind of talking more generally about just what they wear, but this ruling was specifically about religious iconography and religious clothing. But that's still clothing. So if said religious clothing presents a safety risk, and the government has to make a binary decision about whether or not it's allowed, you have to rule that it's allowed to ban that stuff. Simply because some businesses, in some workplaces, it might be a safety risk. If that's the case, you cannot have the situation where employees are putting themselves at risk because of their faith. That's going to get people hurt. You have to remedy that. So in a way, the only real choice, I suppose, assuming what I just said, is that they allow companies to do that, to ban certain clothing. Other than that, the only real reason is politics. It's trying to keep religion out of politics, trying to maintain that secularism. It's for the image. It's partly, at least, for the image. The problem with that is that means that companies can now discriminate against, for example, Muslim headdresses under the guise of them banning all religious iconography. If the only people who work for them with religious dress are Muslims, then they can easily say, hey, everyone who's wearing a religious piece of dress, you're not allowed to do it anymore. Now what they're saying is anyone with religious dress. What they mean is Muslims. They can easily hide their racism like that. And that is an issue. That's definitely something you don't want to happen. And with this ruling, companies can do that, and no one will ever be able to prove it. So that might be an issue. That probably will be an issue, given how many racists there are being vocal right now. But really, it's just that clash between these two freedoms. And here's the thing: the freedom to dress as you like, as I said, why not? That makes sense. Why would you force people to dress in a way that would be immoral? To force people in general to dress a certain way, like that's removing freedoms that that there's no reason to remove. Let people dress as they like. But specifically for religion, religious freedoms are another issue, or another aspect. Like there's the freedom to dress as you like, and religious freedoms. Those are two different freedoms that are clashing with the freedom of businesses to regulate what employees wear. For the religious part of it, I'm not sure to what extent. So here's the thing: it's by banning religious dress in the workplace, there's not, as far as I know, preventing people from practicing their religion. Because while some religions will insist, or at least some views of it will insist that you wear or do things at certain times of day, strictly speaking, they're only being banned from wearing certain clothing in the workplace. That is very specific. That is not the same as saying you may never wear this, or you may not practice your religion. What it here's the conflict. They are perfectly allowed to wear that and practice their religion, just not on the job in the workplace. There's a restriction of if you're going to work for this company and be in their offices or wherever, then you have to dress as they deem fit, whether what they deem fit is for safety or secularism, whatever. So it could be argued that they're not stopping people from practicing their religion, because as far as I know, I don't think there's any religion that would require you to wear something. Maybe Sikhs, but I don't think there's any religion that strictly requires you to wear something in the workplace, or at all times, or any other kind of justification for wearing it in a job. What this means is that when employers ban this, they are not infringing on your right to practice religion, as far as I know. Now, that brings up another issue. What if that is specifically what the religion demands? If it demands that you wear this thing at all times, even when you're working, then while that might be a religious view that's justified, or at least it's believable, I guess. Not believable, but it's clear, right? That's what your religion demands. While that might be acceptable, while that might be the case, that's a bit odd, to say the least. Like, for what possible reason, and I know the answer to this, but for what possible reason could you have to wear anything, really, all day long, or specifically when you're working? Well, the answer, of course, is that religions are based on faith, so there is no reason. It's just, that's how it works. It's dogma. You have to accept it, or you aren't part of the religion, or you have a different view of the religion, or whatever, but that I don't think dogma can, in any case, be justified when it clashes with reality and reason and practicality. If your religion insists that you have to be on fire, you have to be in flames all day long, every day, that's not acceptable. That kind of the freedom to practice that religion is directly harmful to the people who would practice it. And in that case, I don't think the freedom of religion is more important than people's safety. Because if people do that, they are putting themselves needlessly, or at least based on all reason, it's needlessly putting themselves in danger. At risk of death. Well, fire is probably going to kill you, so pretty definite risk of death. Definite risk of death doesn't make any sense. Definite whatever. But so that point, I don't think there's any religious denomination that requires you to wear something when you're working. But even so, the whole idea of religious freedom is freedom of thought, let's say. You're allowed to believe whatever you like, as long as it doesn't clash with real life, let's say. And by that I mean, you want to light candles, you want to pray to a god, you want to have a shrine, whatever, fine, you do whatever you like in your home. Within reason, within moral limits. As soon as your religion, your beliefs, are causing harm to others or yourself, or they're causing issues, clear issues, that's when freedom of religion is no longer it's no longer as important as other factors, and it should not, and in such a case it might not be maintained. It would be justified to not to not allow freedom of that specific religious freedom of religion in that specific case. Which connects again, so that point is in a way saying that if your religion is irrational and causing harm, then it should not be part of law. It should not be allowed. Especially if it's causing harm. But that connects again with secularism. You don't want religion in government, because religion is dogmatic, based on faith. And if you start making laws based on faith, you're making laws that might be based on nothing. If that faith is wrong, you might believe in it, right? You have faith that is true. If it's not true though, and you're just believing in it, but there's no actual reason for it, your beliefs are wrong, if that's the case, then you are imposing those dogmatic, unprovable beliefs on others, and probably causing issues in the process. If the Salem witch trials were a government-run thing, in which innocent people died, then if that were a government-run program, then a lot more innocent people would die. Why? Simply because of dogma. That's not good. In no way is that good. Just because you believe someone might be a witch, and you run these trials in which innocent people who are not witches die, that's bad. That's a bad part of religion. But it's even worse when that is part of the government, when the government is religious and does stupid things like that. Because obvious practical impact, people died. That's not acceptable in any way. But again, allowing people to wear a headdress, that's fine. That's not a religion encroaching on government. But it would be if this case were not such that it seems more important that businesses be able to dictate what their employees wear for multiple reasons. So really, both sides in the moderate view have a good point. Religious freedom is a good thing. Freedom to dress is a good thing, but also freedom for businesses to operate as they like within reason. That's also a good thing. So those are conflicting. The extreme views of both sides are stupid. Religious fanatics who think that this is the government abandoning them or being anti-Muslim or whatever, that's not right. That's not true. It doesn't make any sense. This is a complicated legal matter in which they've made a decision, which I don't think is a right-wing one. I think it's I don't expect the EU Parliament to be controlled by fascists, as far as I know. The other side of it are the fascists themselves who are applauding this as, yay, we hate Muslims, we hate immigrants, so this is cool. No, that's not the case either. That's not what's going on. This is not an attack on Muslims. And the extremes of both sides think this is an attack on Muslims. It's not. Don't take it out of context, don't take it out of proportion. Is that the right word? Expression? I don't know. So, at first I thought, ooh, they're banning headscarves? That doesn't sound right. That sounds like infringement on people's civil liberties. But at the same time, this just happens to be what the fascists like. But it makes sense. The fascists don't understand. They think this is an attack on any attack on Muslims, any restriction of Muslims to them is a good thing because they're idiots. But this is the EU being reasonable. Now the left wing might say this is intolerant. It's not intolerant. The kind of left wing who would say that are probably I don't like this term, but it's what are called the regressive left, the politically correct. A politically correct left wing would have, impractically, I would say, have not banned the headscarf or not allowed banning of headscarves, just because of civil liberties thing. F the companies, power to the people, but that doesn't make sense in this case. Normally, in most situations, that is the general way to do things. In this case, it's the reasonable thing to do. Not left, not right. The reasonable thing to do is give companies, private companies, mind you, private companies, the right to do this. Because if they don't, actually nothing happens if they don't. Either way, there's no real issue. The only issue, this whole issue is derived from dogma, that people feel the need to wear whatever. Is it? What's the origin of this issue? I think there's two origins. One, people dogmatically believe that they have to wear this thing, whatever it may be, from whatever religion. The other origin is that racists don't like it. There might be another reason. Maybe it's not right. I'm trying to think. For what possible reason would a rational, not racist person walk into a shop, see someone wearing a headdress, and have any kind of legitimate complaint about the headdress? What possible reason? What possible problem could that be? I can't think of any. Might be, but I don't know what it would be. So my assumption is that this is a problem of religious dogmatic people versus racists. That's the origin of this problem. And when it comes down to it, the racists are wrong. Their point of view where, oh, I don't want to go into a shop with a Muslim person or a person wearing a headdress. That makes no sense. That is not a liberty. It's not a liberty, first of all. But it's also not a liberty that you would defend. You're not going to defend racists' right to avoid people with headscarves. That's not how anything works. You do want to protect people's right to wear whatever they like. I don't even know now which side I would go on. Because really, there's no impact either way. This is a fabricated issue. It's not a real issue. If people are not allowed to wear a headdress at work, no big deal. If people are allowed to wear it and their company doesn't like it, also, yeah, big deal. Who cares? It doesn't affect anything. There's no impact of wearing a headdress at work or anywhere else, really. But I think probably the deciding factor is that if your company has whatever safety issues or any reasonable reason, any rational reason to ban some kind of clothing, the company should be allowed to enforce that reasonable ban. So, yeah, that's the issue. The legality of this is such that forcing companies to accept people wearing whatever doesn't make much sense. Because there might be a reason for them to ban it. But allowing companies to ban a headdress or whatever clothing, that makes a bit more sense. There are reasons to ban things. There isn't really much reason to allow things. In terms of dress, I mean. Like, it's not a huge deal to be able to wear whatever you like. It's nice. You should be able to have that right. But in a extreme case, if it comes down to it, and you have to decide, can companies ban dress or can they never ban dress? I think it makes more sense for them to be able to ban whatever kind of dress. In this case, a religious dress. But the whole issue is just politics. And this is not what we should be focusing on. So, the right wing thinks this is a good step in the direction of racism because they're stupid. And the religious people think this is an attack on Muslims. Everyone thinks it's an attack on Muslims. It's not. This is just a silly issue that doesn't matter. It's someone wanted to sue because their company fired them for wearing a thing. It's stupid. So yes, people should be allowed to wear whatever they want to wear. But if there is a practical issue with that, that's when their right to wear something is no longer as important as it would be otherwise. I think that covers this issue. So, to conclude, it's probably the right move because there's two conflicting sides that are both right, but one is more right than the other. And unfortunately, those two freedoms do conflict with each other. They do clash. But I think they chose the right one, I guess. But in the end, it doesn't really matter a huge deal. Alright. I'm going to keep this up for a minute or two. If anyone wants to ask any questions, and I only see one person who I assume is not going to ask any questions or make any comments, but I will leave this up just in case. And I think I'll end it there. Play a game? Maybe not. We'll see. So that was a discussion on the EU Parliament's recent decision to allow workplaces to ban religious clothing. In fact, it's part of a general policy covering religious and political symbols. And I think that's legally consistent, morally irrelevant, and just like, okay, like it's okay, whatever. It seems like a big deal, but it's not. We should be focusing on bigger issues, like getting rid of populists. Alright, cool. That was a discussion. And thanks for watching.